In this video, I'll be showing you how to use HTML and CSS to design the layout of this form using HTML form elements and styling them with CSS properties. So in this tutorial, you will learn about the elements we can find under our form element, which are input element. I also have element for email, and I also have for the password, date of birth, and file, also input type file. And I also have just this basic button here, which does nothing for now because of the property I gave it. And I also have this submit button here, which you can use in submitting any data that is being entered into this form. So to get started, let's go into our text editor. So here in my text editor, I will like to create a new file. I will call it form.html. So after I create this file, you can see this form.html is under this form folder. So this is right inside this form folder and not outside there. The root folder for this HTML file here is this form folder. So in my HTML, I would like to increase the view so that you can see what I'm doing properly. Here I have my template, which is the doc type HTML, then the HTML elements, the head and the body. In my head here, I would like to change this. I will call it form. Let's say for instance form 2, because I already have one here, form, which is the sample we'll be using in this video here. So to proceed, I come down to my body element, which will hold everything that will be displaying in my output here on the screen in the browser here. So everything that will be displaying there are always in the body element, whereas all this meta information on the title will not display in this content here, but they are the information the browser use in rendering our HTML document. So I come here to create a form element, which is form. The action, we don't really need that for now, so I just clear that out and I come down here. The first element I'll be having here is the h1 element, which will serve as the heading. Here it says registration form, so I would like to do that here using h2 element. So my h2 element here, I would like to have registration form. So that's for the h2 element. Then beneath that, I will be having my other form attribute here. And one thing if you should realize is that once I click on my first name, the cursor automatically change into this input. Then once I click on last name also, the cursor change to this place, email. Likewise, if I go back, it reflects the same way. So clicking on any of these move the cursor to that input element. And the password also, we can also realize that anything you type in there will always be encrypted using these dots. So that is just the information that the browser render. And I also have my date property here, where you can just select your date of birth. So those are the basic things in this, and you can also choose file from here, which will bring out this. Then you can choose from this to upload any file to the website or to the form. So to proceed, I'll be coming down here, then I'll be having my label element. Label element is the one that holds this description for each of these input elements. So from my first one here, I'll be having first name, that is label for, which will be matching the ID that I'll be having for my input element here. So the label for here is what? First name. So followed by colon. On the next line, I'll be having my input element, that is input tag. So here it's saying input type text, that is whatever value you'll be putting into this field will always be text value. You can also put numeric or mixed alphanumeric value there. it doesn't have any problem with that. But if I'm using number, there's no way to accept any any alphabetic value there, because it already have um, auto validation, which will tell you that input type is incorrect. So yeah, I'm having my input type to be text. Then to proceed, I'll be having the ID so that it will match whatever I have as my label here. That is what is triggering that function. When I click on this, then it the cursor move automatically to this input element here. So that is what will match this. That is, whatever value you have here, you build whatever you have as your ID element here. So I'll also have my first name there as the ID. Then I also have my name property that will be used by the back end to fetch the data from this front end. I'll also call that first name. And we don't necessarily need that in this tutorial, but I'll just explain how it goes about. So yeah, my name attributes here take the first name also, which the backend will be using. So this little text that is inside this input field is saying enter first name. That is, here it's also saying enter last name. It is a placeholder. When I click on that place and I start to input anything, that thing will erase from there. So that happened because of this properties here, attribute placeholder, which is enter first name. So okay, so that's just for the first element here that I have. I proceed to move to the next one. So coming to the next line, I don't have to type everything from the beginning again, so I would just like to um, duplicate this on several lines. That is, I have it, I think, 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I also have the one for the date and the one for the file. So I would just like to duplicate that also. So to continue, then so that's this one is for the first name. Then I'll be having for the last name also, which will be label for last name. That's just the text that will be displayed out here. Then these 4 attributes, like I said earlier, it must be the same with whatever you have in your ID attribute. So I will just put it there and say, okay, this one will be last name. Then the name here, which the backend will be using to fetch the data, is also last name. Then the placeholder will say enter last name. So that's all for this. Then I move to the next. I give them some space. Okay, just for readability purpose, I give them some space. Then coming up here after the last name, the next thing I have is the email. So I'm having the input type here will be different. So first of all, I would like to change this 4 attribute and the ID attribute to be the same thing, which will be what? Email. Then this text input type, which means what type of input will I be putting in this my input field. This here will be what? Email. That is just auto validation that will validate this and say, okay, whatever input you have to put here is email. So I'm having the name attribute to be set to what? Email. Then this placeholder will say enter email. So I move to the next line, which this one is saying password. That means I have to put my input type to be password so that it will be able to encrypt whatever information the user has plugged in into this field. So then I will also change this 4 attribute and this ID attribute to match each other, which will be what? Password. Then sorry, this one will be email. I didn't change this earlier. So here I'm having password feed. So password. Then this type also will be set to password so that it will auto validate whatever input the user puts there. This one will also be password. Then this one will say enter password. So here will be after the password field, the next field I'm having is the date of birth. We should be displaying the date. So here I'll be having date of birth. I would like to just short that and abbreviate that. I'll call it DOB, date of birth. So this input type here will no longer be text. I would like to use a function like date time. So I'll be using date time local. Then this placeholder, I don't necessarily need it here because the information will already be provided by this label element. So to proceed, after the date of birth element, what do I have? I have passport, which means the user should put in a file. Okay, so that will also be changing. This should be date of birth. Date of birth. So here the user will be plugging in a file. Here it will be passport. That is the place. That was the text that will be displayed there. Passport. Then for the label 4 and this ID attribute will also be set to passport. Okay, so here also I would like to call it passport. Then this one I don't think I really need that. I will have to remove this placeholder also. So the input type here, since I'm using a passport, that is the user will have to upload a file, so I'll be using the input type file, which will give the user an access to input a file. And the next one here is just this button elements. Is the button element. I don't think I really need this element for that, so I will just like to remove this. Then I will call the button. Then for this button, whatever value that will be displaying out here will be in this anchor bracket here. Then I'll be having hello world. So that's whatever will be displayed or using this button element. And the last thing I have here is the input element for submit, which I will be using to submit this form. So I move ahead and I come back to my editor here. I have my input, which the type will be to submit. Input type is set to submit. So whatever value will be displayed displayed using this value attribute. So I'll be having the submit text here to be displayed to the user. Submit. So that is just for my input type submit. We should be triggering the submit function, that is to submit this form automatically to whichever action I have put in here. That is wherever location that I've plugged in here inside my form elements in the action and method, which may be post or get. So we don't necessarily need that now. Okay, this we do for whatever I have here. So let's save this file and display this using the live server. So I use open with live server. Then this should open the browser and displaying whatever I have here. So as you can see, I have my registration form, first name, everything. They are just on a single line. Everything now on a single line, which means whatever I have in my form, that is most of the elements in my form element, that is input, label, button, and whichever element like select that I have, they are all inline elements. So that's why this is appearing on a single line. I would have to use CSS to adjust this in order to look like what I have up here. So this is what I have for now. Let's now edit this using the CSS. Okay, so going back, I just have to open a CSS file. Let's say the file structure. I open a CSS file using this link. Okay, then I say what will I like to name my style sheet. I'll use the style the styles.css name. So I save it as that style.css. Saving my file, nothing happened yet. So I have to come down here into this my folder that I'm working on currently to create a new file calling it styles.css. So I'll say style.css. So I'm having a style.css file here now, style.css. But let's see if these two actually link to each other. Once I over this, it says I should follow link. So I click on this, it moves to this file, which means I correctly input the file name. So these files are related. They are connected using that file name href attribute. So now I'm having my style here. I would like to share this to one side of the window. So one side of the window, then I'll have to remove this. Aha, so this is what I have now. So to proceed, I will start with the general class, which will be selecting every element that I have here. So I'll be starting with the asterisk, which means for all elements, this is what should be inherited. The margin, I set it to 0, which is none. I don't want any margin. Then I also say the box sizing, I want them to just be border box. That is, this width that I specify for any element will contain for every of its margin and any content it has. It won't expand beyond that. That's for the box sizing. Then I also proceed, I move on to the font family just to change the font family. I name this one area, so I use area here. Then I move to the next line. That's all the style that I want to be inherited from this element. So now I start with this parent element here, which is what? Form. Parent element, which is form. If I should save this file, no much changes has occur in this, just the fonts, and as you can see, there's no margin, that is, there's no space between this text and the browser. Everything just starts immediately. Okay, so let's say for instance I comment this out and let's review. As you can see, there are some spaces here. The h1, the h2 element has margin, and this one also has margin. But once if I go back to its previous state, as you can see, there's no longer any space here. So I proceed with what I have in my code here. Then I say the first element I would like to edit is the form element. We should be taking this form element, then I'll be setting their properties. So I have the background to be set to RGBA. Then this RGBA, what are the values that are associated with it? I have 10 here, and I have 48 here. Then I have 214 here. Then I also have 0.6. This 0.6 is just trying to tell it that, okay, I want it to be transparent by 60%. Then the next attribute I have here is the color, which I'll be setting the color to be white. Then the next thing I have here is the width, that is, I'm setting the width for this form to be 500 pixels. Then I'll also be having the margin and the padding set. So the margin, I'm giving this margin auto so that it will fall into the center of this page. Then I'm also having a padding which will be 25 pixels. So that's for the form element. Now let's see what this has done to our file. I open this up into a large screen. As you can see, this form element take the width of 500 pixels and it is now centered to the page, the space here and the space on the right also. So this the styling element that I use here is what? Margin, just to make sure that whatever I have in my form element fall into the center of this page. So I go back into my text editor to proceed with the other style that I will have to make. So I have the h2 element, which is the registration form. That is this title here. So the h2 element, I set the text align property to be center, that is to center this text, which it has done here. It has centered the text into the middle of the page. Then Then I proceed by having the other properties that I'll be having here are margin. The margin is set to 15 pixel, and I also have the color set to blue, then followed by the font weight. Just to make it much bold, I set it to bold. So I save this. Then as you can see that everything has adjusted to whatever value I gave it from here. So that is what I have here for now. Now going back to my file, I just have to set the text size so that it will be a bit large from what I have here. I set the font size. I set the font size to be 45 pixels. So I save it. The text is now enlarged. That's for the H2 element. To proceed, I'm having other elements which are the label and the input. And like I said, all these elements are inline elements. To make it block element, or to make each of these item fall on a single line, I can come into my HTML editor here and just set the an HR element, which will make whatever I have to fall on the next line. Let's say for instance I put an HR element here. So this will just create a new line, just like a new line element. As you can see, after first name there is a line dash under it, and other elements fall on the next line. The same thing if I should come here, and I can also use the BR, which should not give it any line, but the next element will fall on the next line. So these are bringing them on to the next line, but that's not a better practice. So I have to just go back to the previous state of this file, and I save what I have here to go back to their position. I will use the CSS because using CSS is much better practice. Why is that advisable? Is because most people are using assistance technology to read the screen. So using this element might not confront or interpret the right information to them. So that's why I have to use CSS to design whatever I have here. Then the next element I would like to use here is the label element. I call them by their name, the label. So here, this label, I want each text to be on each line. So I will say the text, the display should be block, because they are automatically inline elements. So I use CSS to change their display property to block. Then I also set the font size. I set the font size to 20 pixels. Then I also set the font weight. I set the font weight to bold. Then I also set the margin bottom so that it will give any text below some space. I set the margin bottom. I set it to 10 pixels. So I save my file, then I'll be having this on my screen. It has now moved every other element it has right before it to the next line, but it's not what I want yet. So I proceed. The next thing here is for me to adjust my input element. So I'm having input. Then what are the attributes I will have to give it? I also want my input element to display on a single line, which is block attribute. Then the width I'm setting it to 100%. Then followed by the padding, I'm also setting that to 10 pieces. Then I'll be having the outline set to none. So I have outline set to none, then followed by the margin bottom also, just to give it some space. The margin bottom, I set it to 10 pixels. Okay, I would like to give this one 20 pixels so that we gave it much space. Other elements that come after, we have much space. So saving my file, this is what I have here for now. So I would like to check whatever is not correct here just to fix this. So I found the error here. It is not 100 pixels, it will be 100%. So I set that to 100%, then I save my file, and you can see that this input element has already spanned the whole of this width. So this is what I have for now. Then I proceed with other adjustment I have to make. The next one that I have to make is this button, the one with hello world, the hello world text. So this button is what I have to adjust next. Coming down, then I have to call the button class, the button element. Then I set some value to that. I call the background, to be blue. Then I have the color to be set to white. Then I also have the font size and padding. I have the font size set to 20 pixels, and I also have the padding to 20 pixels, and also margin to 20 pixels, margin to 20 pixels. So after that, I'll be having the display also set to block, the display property set to block. That's all for the button element. Saving my file, then I should come back here, page down. I'm having this right here, no effect yet. So I would like to introduce us to over class. We call this the pseudo class in CSS. So I will be calling the button element, then I will be setting its over class. That is over. When a user hover their mouse on this element, what should happen? The background should be set to black. The background should be set to black. Then the next thing here is the color to be set to white, and the width should be set to 50%. So I'll be having the color to white and the width to be set to 50%. So I'm having this, and I save my file. So coming down here, not as you can see, once I over this, it is taking effect like I want from what I have here. So that is about that. Proceeding with what I have, I'll be having my input type, which is the submit, which is the last input element that I'm having here. So I'll be having the input. I'm styling the submit button specifically because these input elements are already have their own style. They all span 100% of the parent element. So the input here, I will be specifying which type of input, the one that has the type, the one with the type that is equal to a string value, which is what? Submit. As you can see here, I have the type set to submit. So that's what I'll be adjusting here. Okay, I say what style am I specifying to this element exactly? I'll be specifying the background color and also color. I'll be specifying the background to be green. Then I also have the color set to white. Then I also have the font size set to 20 pixels, and I also have the outline and border set to none. Outline none. Border set to none. So the next thing I'll be having is the border radius and the font weight. The border radius set to 20 pixels also. Then the font weight set to bold. The font weight set to bold. So I save my file. Then this is what I should be having once I come down. I'm having this. Oh, the background, I didn't say the background properties, so I'm having the background set to green. So I proceed, I save my file, then I should be having the effects to take place here. Aha, the background is now set to green and the color is now white, but nothing is happening. It seems like there's something left. So I go back to my code editor. It means I have to give it an over effect also. But which element am I giving an over effect? I'm giving this element an over effect. So I would just like to copy this and paste it here. So I'll just say give it an over class over. Then when a user over this button, what should happen is to set the border radius. So I'll be calling radius the border radius the border radius to be 10 pixels. That means it should reduce, because here I already have it to be set to 20 pixels. Then once I over the button, it should be reduced to 10 pixels. Then I also have the border the border, so that everything will just be okay. I have the 5 pixels. 5 pixels means how thick. Then which style am I using? The solid. Then what color should the border be? Then I set it to white, which means 5 pixels solid white. Then I save my file. I go back to this. Then this is what I'm having. Once I go down to the page, I hover over this button, then this is what happened. Then this submit. But one thing you should notice that once I click on this, something happened. It reload this form automatically. But I don't want to give any functionality to this button. Then what should I do? There's also an attribute that I can set to my button element here in my file. I'll call that attribute disabled. That means you cannot use the button. There's an attribute set to an element. It will just be displayed on the screen there, but it doesn't have any functionality. I can click on this several times, then nothing should happen. It doesn't reload or submit anything on this form. So this is how you can design a form using the CSS and HTML to design a form. Alright, thank you. Follow this page for more, and I appreciate you guys. Thank you.